I think marketing really needs to step up and show that we have the insights. Back to that, we have all of this knowledge that can accelerate sales, that can drive more revenue, that can help with loyalty, can help with creating a sense of community for your customers. We're talking to human beings. It might be in a company, we're selling to a company, but within the company that we're selling to, we're actually selling to people. And no matter what you say, a human being, when they're buying most things, unless it's a commodity like a pen or whatever, your toilet roll, you are going to have an emotional and a rational aspect to your journey, even if it's fleeting.
Welcome to the B2B Experience, brought to you by Big Light, Europe's leading independent experience design agency. In this podcast series, we speak to digital pioneers in B2B and tell real stories of breaking down barriers and delivering change. I'm Steve Borges, and my guest today is Tejal Patel. Hi, Tejal.
Hello, hi. Thank you for having me today.
Your first job, started out your first job in media marketing, made the move to BBC.
Please don't say what year. Let's not talk about the year. Let's start.
It was some time ago, your first job in media marketing, rolls onto the BBC, and then a kind of roll call of increasingly senior digital marketing roles at some of the biggest brands in the world. I mean, if you look at it, Virgin, Microsoft, Nokia, and Cisco. And of course, did what not that many people have done. I think more people will do it. Made that move from a B2C focus to a B2B focus. Tell me a bit about how it all came about.
I think the usual thing when you come out of university, even today, right? It's really hard getting that first gig, the first job, the experience, not having the experience, applying like crazy. And the weird thing is, I was back at home in Essex. And I happened to get a job that was almost on the doorstep, which was it's a national newspaper company, but it was the kind of regional local newspaper group. And it was media. I guess it's working for media publishers in the world before that was a thing for marketing people, and understanding demographics and targeting and why that was important for a newspaper, and the revenue came from advertising. These are all new things for me as to where the revenue came from. And I learned a lot about commercial thinking, working with salespeople, and really applying some of the theory of targeting strategies in for the first time in a job. So yeah, I think that, as first jobs go, it's very humble beginnings, but you always learn a lot, right? Your first job, you never
Yeah.
can really forget it.
But from humble beginnings to the big time, straight to the BBC.
Yeah, I don't know. Again, this was like, when people, I'm going to really show my age throughout this podcast. So I apologize to my future self on this. Uh, the, these were the days when the job ads were still in newspapers, and I happened to see this new area of the BBC called BBC Resources. So it was the production facilities of the BBC that were separated out to basically drive revenue for a commercial arm again, where they were trying to drive more revenue into the BBC to fund the BBC in addition to the license fee. And all of the skills and all of the production, the editing, post-production, all of those skills of the BBC, they wanted to package up and sell to filmmakers and documentary makers, whatever it might be, advertising industry, the creative industry, when they're making their um, ads and things. So the role there was, again, quite a kind of junior role. I applied, and hey, luck happened to be on my side, and I got that role, which was, I've got to say, looking back on my career, probably I'm most proud in a way, because that's such a British institution. And just, I'm 20 something and second job, and I get to walk around and I'm seeing, TV personalities kind of going in and out of studios. And
Brilliant. And then on to Virgin and Virgin Cards. We were talking about this the other day. That sounded fascinating as well.
so when the Virgin thing happened, so we're just talking at the start of the first kind of .com boom, and literally anything with .com on the end. It's a little bit like, I'm sure we're going to talk a bit about AI later, but if you've got AI in your URL now, you're going to be worth $1 billion before even getting out of bed. And I think that's what was happening with the dot com boom originally. Anything dot com, high valuations, anything was possible. The world was going crazy. And hey, this crazy person who had a car industry background managed to get funding from Branson, funded by Virgin to sell cars online, which was at a time where people were just getting used to the idea of buying books and CDs. It was very early days of Amazon. Suddenly there was a company that was going to sell cars online. And so that was pretty nutty because that was my first startup experience. Literally 20, 30 people when I joined the company. We were sharing desks and no infrastructure. So I went from BBC, where it became huge, kind of big corporation, into a startup, and everyone kind of tried to do everything. You made it up as you went along. There was no structure. If you wanted to do something, you could just do it, right? So from a learning point of view, for that to have come so early in my career, amazing, learning about paid search and building out banner ads and working on the web experience. I mean, these were all roles I played in a marketing executive role, which later were much more specialist. You saw paid search specialists and web experience experts and all sorts. And there I was in a startup kind of doing a little bit of all of that and not even realizing at the time how career defining all of that was gonna be.
And it was career defining because that kind of set the tone for what was to come really, wasn't it? Across these amazing brands that you work with. I mean, I'm sure we don't really have time to go through them all, but any particular highlights on that journey?
I think the cars, yeah, the Virgin Cars part, probably the highlight was that it was completely, the tables were turned. It started as a digital only company and it became a physical entity. So, it's all in we used to use terms like bricks and mortar going digital. This was digital going bricks and mortar. So taking something that was online and building out a physical experience. What is that showroom experience going to be? I remember it was in Manchester. And then we were thinking, okay, we've created this online. Now we've got to follow it through in the physical world. How would that look? And I'd never had any of that sort of experience apart from working in retail, through my education years, as so many people do.
What drove that shift, if you like, for focus from B2C to B2B? What came about to make that happen?
Yeah, I think it's a great question because it was a very deliberate move on my part to seek out a role like that. I'd been well established in B2C. I was at that point, I'd been working at Microsoft in the consumer tech, and I ended up at Microsoft because they acquired the phone business from Nokia. And so by luck, I was a Microsoft employee for a couple of years and really got to see the inner workings of that. But I reached a point, and we could have a whole separate podcast on the rise and fall of Nokia. I think it's a well story around in terms of what happened there. But I knew that the days were numbered at Microsoft with the consumer devices part. It was like such a bad decision that had been made there, and it was never going to win the war between Apple and Android. So at that point, I was thinking, where do I go next? Because really, I've done a lot of great things in B2C, but what's missing? And I literally did a bit of a reflection and a mind map on my own, sitting down, drawing things out. What have I got energized by? Where would I like to go next? And it kind of just literally jumped out of the page that I need to go work in B2B. And this is like 2016. So nearly 10 years ago, 9 years ago. And I thought there's that's untapped B2B. Not hearing much about it, but I feel like I've got interesting skills that could convert well into B2B. So I proactively targeted a few companies. Cisco was one of them, and applied for a job. And the interesting thing was, and I must give a lot of credit to the two men who hired me there, Joseph and Jeremy, who are, people I admire a lot still today. they deliberately wanted to hire someone who didn't come from B2B. They didn't want any of the baggage or any of we know how to do it because we've done it somewhere else. They literally wanted someone who would have a fresh perspective and, serendipitous, if I said that correctly, that I was there at the right moment again, where I came from all of that background. And I'd spent, by the way, I'm probably worth mentioning another pivotal moment of spending a couple of years in the San Francisco area when I was at Nokia Microsoft. And I think that actually had a lot to do with me getting the job at Cisco as well. I understood what it's the dynamics when the headquarters of a company is different. It's in the US culture. I think those things mattered to Cisco a little bit, even though the role I was going to do was a European regional role. I think that helped build a bit of a relationship, I suppose. So, yes, I think that was a deliberate move. Great that they wanted someone who didn't necessarily have the B2B background. Otherwise, I would never have got the job.
Obviously, large part of your career in B2C, digital marketing, over to B2B. What are the main differences, would you say, between B2C and B2B?
Okay, I think first of all, I'm a little bit biased because of the tech world I've worked in. So my whatever I say is because of the kind of company I've worked in, which I think tech companies attract techie people. And by that I mean over engineering things, really over engineering, over complicating. The more complicated we get, the better it is. The more platforms and technology we use to do our marketing, hey, that's great. There's a real obsession about things like that, and there's very little conversation about the customer. Um, and when there is a conversation about the customer, what I was also very surprised at, the big difference for me was the over rotation on rational messaging and marketing and almost no emotional aspects whatsoever. Whereas I think, and it's a mistake, by the way, again, for B2B marketers to think B2C, if you've never worked in B2C, that B2C is all about emotional. It isn't. I think B2C does a very good job of balancing both. Having worked in consumer tech, I was used to seeing a good balance between emotional um, kind of messaging and having the rational aspects and the product aspects being brought in. And there was a lot of insight driven approach. I think, for example, at Nokia, I've got to say, I feel very proud that up till now, I have not worked with any smarter people around research, consumer research, and insights like I did with the bunch of people I worked with at Nokia. You could say, well, then what happened with Nokia? Again, it's a different story. The product didn't stack up, but the insights and the way the discipline was around what do we know about the consumer? How do we group them together? The research that went in, the personas that were developed, and then that really influenced the marketing strategy. I got to Cisco and I was asking, is there a customer research team? Is there a customer research leader, a person I can then talk to? Literally like crickets. We're talking a 70, 80,000 employee company. And there was not a single customer insights team. There might have been insights like insights and analytics, but where's your customer research team? Literally none existed. And I think that tells you everything. So I would really challenge anyone if they're a B2B organization, who's doing your customer research and do you have people? Do you use that? You might use AI now and, synthetic audiences to do your research, but are you doing it? So that shocked me. And then the fact that everything was very rational driven. And I remember doing a roadshow internally, literally my first 6 months at Cisco. And we were doing a roadshow around, we're going to become much more digitally driven. We're going to invest more in digital channels and digital experiences, less in the whole events that B2B is known for. And I remember standing up, it was in Germany, this meeting, and I stood up and I said, we're talking to human beings. It might be in a company, we're selling to a company, but within the company that we're selling to, we're actually selling to people. And no matter what you say, a human being, when they're buying most things, unless it's a commodity like a pen or whatever, your toilet roll, you are going to have an emotional and a rational aspect to your journey. Even if it's fleeting, there is still an emotional aspect. And I remember standing there, and I still remember my slide. And I think that was literally might have been one of the first times I'd heard someone talk in that way about emotional and rational. And I don't want to say every B2B company is like that, but my experiences so far show there's very little regard for the emotional aspects of buying. I think there's more talk now about trust and thought leadership and peer-to-peer influence and reviews and stuff, which is, entering the emotional territory. But in 2025, and it's probably just happening a bit more now.
One of the things that I come across very often is people within B2B who are typically in digital roles but struggle to convince the organization to act, to initiate change. Um, Based on your experience, what's the most successful ways of initiating change in B2B organizations?
Oh, that's one of my bugbears, by the way. I carry the scars of 25 plus years working in digital marketing and always having to justify investments in this area, doing things in digital. Why digital media? Why social media? Why influencer marketing? So I don't think that's actually just a B2B thing. I think even in B2C, um, it's really hard to get the buy-in to do different things unless it's a scrappy kind of organization and there's really brave, innovative leadership at the top who buy into it. Companies have become very risk averse, I think. Has become as margin pressures there, as it's all about growing revenue, showing the bottom line, whether you PE invested or you're publicly trading. Every year you're expected to show growth. Every quarter you're expected to show growth. So because of that, the trade-off is, well, we can't take risk. So I do get that. And I think innovation becomes a lot harder. But in terms of making change where it's the changing tide, the way that customers are buying, the way they're researching, right? In B2B, I think that's been one of the eye-opening moments over the last 10 years, 7 to 10 years in B2B is just how much of the decision making's already done um, before before that account or that customer is ready to talk to a human being or to talk to a salesperson. And that's sobering. And so if you're not showing up in the right places, you're going to lose out. So the way I've kind of got those messages across is as much data as you can get, external data, bring in experts. I remember at Cisco, I ran a thing called Digital Pulse. I think it was like a quarterly, let's bring some experts in. We ran it virtually, and it was across the whole Europe region. And people got to come in. It was only for like an hour, hour and a half. There might be a round table or a debate or some discussion about a relevant topic. I'd bring in some external experts and then there might be a Q&A. But what that type of format allowed me to do was help raise the bar of education of what is possible and what is happening out in the world and what our customers are thinking about. So I think if you start with education, uh, people will understand why you might need to make a change rather than, hey, here's my idea and let's make it happen. Let's change the way we've always done it. I think it doesn't always work. The bigger the company, the more buy-in that you need. And the changing of mindset is so important to make change happen.
And so, with that change in mindset and change in belief, does that negate the need for a solid ROI before you get some investment to do something different?
I think sometimes you do. One thing I used to really advocate for, by the way, and this is even in the B2C world, I used to try and carve out 5 to 10% of my budget every year for innovation. And we'd decide what that would be based on whatever the company goals were. But I would always go to my boss at the time and say, look, don't hold me to account in the same way you do with everything else. I want to be able to try something different. And then if it works, it becomes part of our business as usual. But I need 3 months to test it out. And then if it works, we roll it into it, and then it can have all the targets and the ROI components. And I think that often worked. I managed to
If
do that at Cisco for a while. But definitely, I remember doing a lot of that at Three, at Microsoft as well for a while as well. That was a tactic that worked. So yes, I think you have to have a little bit and a small carved out budget, which is maybe acceptable.
if you think back at your career now, is there anything that you know now that you wish you'd known earlier?
I would say that I think I would have held a different position with sales. I've always behaved subserviently, I think. I think often marketing teams are designed to be in service of sales. Certainly where I've worked for much of my career. And I think what I'm learning that really we are two sides of the same coin. We're both trying to get closer to the customer. One wants to understand customers better, wants to engage them more, and the other wants to sell to them. But they're two sides of the same coin. And both have a role to play in fulfilling the needs of a customer, which therefore drives revenue, which therefore drives growth. Because, hey, no one's here for the goodness of their hearts, right? They're here because they've got to grow their company. So I would be much more of an equal partner with sales. And that's easier said than done. I think the people who've achieved it, hats off. But I think in a lot of companies, you're either on two different paths or um, you're there to support. You're a support function. And it really frustrates me, I think. It's a little bit like you're still having to make justifications around investing in digital and why do you need to do social media? And I think those kind of conversations really bore me, but they still happen because there's just so much resistance. And the other conversation is all around the positioning of marketing in sales, in organizations. I think marketing's not become elevated to the level I would have liked to have seen in my career. It's still the support function in many companies. And I don't blame others. I'm not going to blame the victim. I think marketing really needs to step up and show that we have the insights. Back to that, we have all of this knowledge that can accelerate sales, that can drive more revenue, that can help with loyalty, can help with creating a sense of community for your customers. All of those things are not fluffy. What they do is help associate your brand to what the customer's trying to do. That gets you the loyalty, that gets you more business. And I think we don't join the dots up enough. We don't tell a good enough story. That's the irony here, right? That marketers are meant to be great storytellers. And we may do great storytelling externally and win awards for it. But what we don't do is do great storytelling internally. And we need to market ourselves a bit better internally.
And you described a world actually where before the customer even shows up, they've already made decisions about the business and the product. So effectively, marketing, that's the job of marketing, isn't it? That whole communication right up until the time the customer pops up for the first time. So
Exactly. Yeah.
okay, all right. So that's all great. We haven't talked much about AI. Let's just have a quick chat about AI, shall we? Just before we do a wrap up question. So AI, um, how much of it is hype?
I don't think it's hype. I think we've got expectations beyond immediate capabilities, uh, but the capabilities are there over time. So I don't think it's hype. But again, I also believe you need to have clarity of purpose. It's AI is the same as any other tech you might be trying to deploy. Why? What is it going to do? What are your use cases in your organization where that's going to help? And have you asked the right people? Again, back to how is it going to help in the coalface? Or is it the board of directors have decided we better show we're doing something around AI? So I think ask yourself those questions. And also I genuinely believe, and we know this to be fact, don't we? All of us, if we've used it, if you put crap in, you're going to get crap out. Now, getting data integrity in your organization and a good foundation of data is so hard. If you're a big company, it's all over the place and it's a mess. Smaller companies, it's going to be much better. You're going to have much more structured, organized data. You need that in order to get the right outputs. Otherwise, you're just going to get crap. And it's your thinking partner, but you've got to know to ask the right questions. And you've got to always have the human element to it. I think it's that kind of sandwich approach. What is it you're trying to do? So the human element, AI bit falls in the middle because it's going to do some of this great work for you that you maybe weren't capable of, or you were, but have taken you a lot longer. And then, you close it again with the human eye on it. Is this really what I wanted? Does it answer my questions? Is it real? Is it hallucinating? And so I think you need to always have the human part of it. But I mean, I love it. I think when you're a small business like I am now, almost a solo operator, you can have the perception of a lot more people in the background. I haven't got there yet, by the way, but I want to be able to replicate myself several times and create better versions of me with AI. So I'm working on that.
Very good. Very good. Um, Great. So just the reflection really. I mean, it's a great conversation. I like the rational and emotional side of things. The emotional stuff. That's what I like to focus on anyway. The importance of the customer in B2B. Uh, there's so much more to play for if we can put the customer at the center of all of this. It's unthinkable really that we won't. I think we will ultimately. We'll need to put the customer at the center. And I like your idea of connecting people who are at the coalface, as you describe it, with some of that decision making at the top. And of course, you've now introduced me to the AI sandwich, which I'll never which I'll never forget. So, a final question, bit of a closing tradition for us is a B2B buzzword bingo. So what's one buzzword that's overused or overhyped that you wish would just disappear, and why?
I don't know if it's a buzzword. I think everyone must equally hate it like I do, but it's very unique to B2B. And it's three words, but it relates to the funnel. And it's tofu, mofu, and bofu, which I don't know
Okay.
if you've come across it, but
No.
if you're in the depths of B2B like I've been for the last several years, top of funnel, middle of funnel, and bottom of funnel. And it gets
Oh,
shortened to tofu, mofu, bofu. And it used to get used all the time where I've been. I've heard it being used at events as well. It's shocking. I mean, it's shocking actually. I'm amazed that B2B companies do as well as they do with that sort of language they're using to drive business. Let's make it a bit more human. Can we talk about where your customer is in their buying journey? What stage are they at? And I don't know if I like that, but yeah, those are the three words I hate in B2B.
very good. So no more tofu, mofu, or bofu from now on. Great. Very good. Well, thank you very much, Tajal. It's been lovely
Oh, thank
talking
you.
to
It's
you.
been great.
It's
Feels like therapy, Steve. Thank you for that.
a great conversation. So I'm gonna thank you very much. Well, that's it for this episode. If you enjoyed it, then please visit the Big Light website. There, you'll be able to find other episodes and subscribe to access exclusive content. I'll see you next time.